Uh-oh, Pedro.
That animation can only mean one thing. Pedro Espada, former New York State Senator, is in the news again. Senate coup leader, lover of sushi, paid for with your tax dollars, among lots and lots of other things, none of them good. He was in court today, and no one loves a good or bad Pedro story more than our own Andrew. What do you have to report here? Is there a punctuation point finally to our man Pedro?
I guess it's an exclamation point, though it could be anyone you want. Look, he tried to delay this with dental work. He tried to delay this by accusing the judge of everything under the sun. But these crocodile tears, they're for you, Pedro. And because I likely won't be able to talk about him for the better part of the next 5 years. Espada sentenced today to 5 years for tax fraud and essentially embezzling taxpayer cash earmarked for his Soundview healthcare clinics in the Bronx. The Democrat essentially used those clinics like an ATM, financing his lifestyle and campaign activities as well. The man who once called himself Hurricane Espada and hurled dollar bills at protesters he claimed were paid to complain, in the end was all alone before he was cuffed and hauled off after court today. His son, who was his co-defendant, turned on Espada, claiming their schemes, they were all Dad's idea. This so the younger Espada can face separate sentencing, and he's hoping a lighter sentencing. In 2009, Espada led a group of Democratic defectors to essentially take over the state Senate and throw power to the Republicans so he could earn the title Majority Leader and the member cash that comes with it. He represented the Bronx, but he had a home in Westchester County. He used clinic cash to pay for a ghostwriter for a book that was never published and for a petting zoo at a relative's birthday party. He spent hundreds of thousands of tax dollars on food, including all that sushi, and for theater tickets, sporting event tickets, and even tickets to Kenny G. Ooh. He also stiffed his suit maker out of what he owed him. And, you know, it's at this point in my reporting that I'm reminded of the old saying, if you can't say something nice about someone, don't say anything at all. Rich?
Yes. Well, guys, you know, Andrew doesn't have someone to kick around anymore, but seriously, it's what's wrong with Albany. You could just sum up and look at this guy from the power grabs where he had no principle at all. It's like, do I get a bigger Lulu if I switch parties today? Remember, he tried to blackmail the Democrats, say, I'll stay with you guys if you give me a better deal. You're not going to make me majority leader. I'll go to the Republicans. Had nothing to do with policy. And like Andrew said, he was an ATM with whatever he could get his hands on. And he represented a district, and he didn't even live in a county. You know, I mean, you can't make this stuff up, but the scariest thing to me was he didn't shock a lot of people when all this stuff came out because they said, oh yeah, that stuff goes on.
No, and the sad thing is, even listening to Andrew, I'm chuckling, and it is not funny at all. It is like out of a bad, it is funny. It is like out of a bad movie. I mean, you can't make these characters up. I mean, tomorrow's Father's Day, you've got the son turning on the father. He's still blaming the judge for the predicament he's in. He's going to go away for 5 years. Maybe he can finally write his book. He probably won't have the ghostwriter. But, I mean, it is like a bad movie script. I mean, it's the same thing that keeps happening up in Albany. And you're right. The sad thing is nobody was surprised, people have chuckled, and it goes on and on.
Pedro Espada has had 9 lives. There's no doubt about it. I have watched this guy walk out of state court, found not guilty of charge after charge after charge. But they got you this time, Pedro, and there's no way around this. I do feel bad for people that attend the South Bronx Clinic that need the health services in the community, because that's real. But I mean, come on, Pedro, you can't walk around doing the things that you were doing. And you know, that gang of 4.
Unapologetically.
Unapologetic. Yeah. And out of that gang of 4, in which they were, I don't if state residents remember, or people that watch the show, one day were Democrats, one day Republican, one day Democrat, one Republicans. 3 out of 4 have gone to jail now. Carl Kruger, Montserrat, and now Espada. 3 out of 4 are in jail. Only one left is Ruben Diaz Sr.
I'll say this for Espada. He never forgot his core constituency, which for him was Pedro.
Now, from a Bronx lawmaker who lived in Westchester County to a court case aimed at helping others from the Bronx find homes in Westchester, Andrew, the segue is a case that we've been talking about for years here, ever since Astorino was a candidate, and he's been talking about this issue and ruffling feathers for the whole term he's been in White Plains. You
know, we frequently covered the aftermath and the slow implementation of this court settlement aimed at eliminating housing discrimination in Westchester. Much of the slowdown coming from Westchester Executive Republican Rob Astorino, who has frequently accused the Department of Housing and Urban Developments of, in his words, social engineering. This week, Astorino took his fight a step further, criticizing the federal court-appointed monitor in the case, James Johnson, of reaching decisions that Astorino says far exceeded the terms of the settlement. Johnson, who has no affiliation with HUD or the Justice Department or anyone involved in the case, but the judge shot back, saying Astorino was misrepresenting his information gathering, and he issued a formal request for Astorino to move the misleading statements, in his words, from Astorino's, and the county's website, paid for with tax dollars. The Westchester-based Journal News website siding with Johnson, calling Astorino's statement full of, quote, histrionics, half-truths, and distortions. Astorino is up for re-election this fall in the heavily Democratic county. One additional note, HUD this week releasing this report showing Westchester far from alone when it comes to housing segregation. It shows that in 28 metro areas across the country, minorities seeking housing far less likely than whites to see the full slate of available options in the area. Actions that the authors of the report label subtle discrimination, but discrimination nonetheless, Rich.
I'm curious, Jeannie, I've spoken to folks from both camps. Do you think this is going to be a real issue when it comes to the next Westchester County executive?
Yeah, well, we know it is, because even tonight, before we went on the air, we were receiving emails from his opponent Noam Bramson, who's the mayor of New Rochelle, citing, or people in his campaign, citing the editorial that Andrew mentioned in the local Journal News newspaper, saying they weren't going to bring this up again because, of course, we had previous emails from the campaign on this, but this really made the case that they've been trying to make all along.
You follow polling numbers. Yeah. Does this issue, you think, resonate with the public, and do they support Astorino, or are they opposed to what he's doing?
You know, it does resonate with the public. If you live in Westchester, and even more broadly, because we've seen Astorino go on Fox News, I mean, he's made a national issue out of this, and it is a national issue, but it does resonate with the public. But as you mentioned, or Andrew mentioned, it is a heavily Democratic district, so it's hard to imagine that this works out in Astorino's favor, but it does resonate with the public.
I will tell you, his handlers, they believe it's not going to hurt him here. I know Bramson feels differently, and certainly the editorial pages, as you know very well, Andrew, say otherwise. But it's going to be interesting how it plays out in November.
I'm just not sure. I haven't seen any specific polling on this, and I'm not sure if this is one that moves the needles, if it actually changes people's votes.
It's going to be, if Bramson can articulate it clearly. It's a complicated issue that goes on for more than one administration and preceded Rob, but we'll see how this shakes out.
It's going to energize Astorino's base and make it easier for him to raise money. Watch.
All right. When we come back, an interesting debate. A devoted teacher was fired, not for anything that she did, but for what her ex-husband did. When you hear this story, I think you'll be surprised, but also maybe a little conflicted. Stay with us, we'll explain.